all animals experience fear, but only humans experience anxiety. They can be really helpful in calming a person's situational anxiety. Hi, this is Jim Breon. Welcome to this YouTube channel where we discuss all things mental health. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and licensed professional clinical counselor in Orange County, California. What I'm going to be talking about today is anxiety, and hopefully trying to understand it from the physiological and the psychological aspects of it. Anxiety is something that we all experience at times, some of us more than others. And anxiety can be fleeting or it can become chronic. And when it becomes chronic and unmanaged is when it starts to create problems in our life. Not all anxiety is bad. Sometimes it can be warning us to prepare for something. Essentially what anxiety is, it's a mental and a physical state of negative expectation. In other words, our brain and our body are starting to prepare for something bad to happen. You can call that worrying. My mom would call worrying borrowing trouble from the future. It's a normal state of defense, a normal response, but often we can overestimate the threat. And these sustained alarm signals that the brain and the body start giving out is what causes chronic anxiety. Chronic anxiety can lead to avoidance. Really, any kind of anxiety can lead to avoidance, because the things that we're anxious about we avoid. And the more we avoid those things, the more anxious we get about them, rather than walking through our anxiety. Essentially what happens is the brain starts to send the body into what we think of as the fight, flight, freeze mode. It involves different parts of the brain, including the amygdala and the hippocampus, which are parts of the limbic system in the brain. And what happens is these fear signals starts to overpower and short circuit the prefrontal cortex, where we think rationally. So our bodies are flooded with stress chemicals, and then our brain and even the visual centers of our body start scanning for threats in the environment. In other words, our brain is telling us there's something dangerous, there's something bad that's going to happen, and then we start looking for bad things. And then our brain interprets even neutral signals as something bad. We have all these physical sensations that go along with anxiety. Now, fear and anxiety are actually two different things. All animals experience fear, but only humans experience anxiety, because anxiety is imagining the future, and animals don't imagine the future in the same way that humans do. So in a sense, anxiety comes from the misery that comes along with imagination. And I want to briefly talk about the difference between anxiety and depression. Although both of them engage some of the same parts of the brain, the amygdala, the fear center, the hippocampus, which is involved with storing, consolidating, and retrieving memories, but they act differently on the brain and body. Long-term depression actually shrinks the hippocampus, the part of the brain that is involved in memory. Anxiety actually increases the activity in the hippocampus. And the hypervigilance that we feel, in other words, always being on guard, looking for threats, causes our heart rate to speed up, our breathing patterns speed up and become more shallow, and we experience muscular tension. And the nerve cell connections start to change. The connections between that fear center and the rational part of our brain start to communicate with each other in very different ways. The anxiety sends alarm signals that shuts off the rational thinking so that it can't talk itself out of the fear signals. But then the frontal cortex starts sending information to the amygdala, the fear center, that actually intensifies the fear. So it increases and increases and increases. And part of the way that it does that is the visual cortex is involved in starting to scan for threats in the environment. And then we start to see everything as a threat. So you can see how this type of anxiety can build and build and build and lead to anxiety attacks, even panic attacks. So we start to feel physical symptoms as a result of anxiety. We experience restlessness. Now, restlessness is a state of unease in the brain because the brain is ready, right? It's ready to take action. Those fear centers are activated. We're scanning for threats in the environment. And because our brain already has a negativity bias, it really sticks to those fear messages. And as we feel this restlessness, then the muscles in the body start anticipating, shifting into fight or flight. So there's the muscular tension. It can lead to sleep problems, and anxiety can lead to insomnia in a lot of cases. So anxiety is this state of arousal, hypervigilance. It starts to interfere with the body's ability to rest, because in order to rest and fall asleep, the brain and the body have to feel that we're safe. We have to feel calm and protected. When your brain is on alert, we can't get to that state. Now, lack of sleep is what we think of as an emotional vulnerability factor. In other words, when we don't get good sleep, we become more emotional. We can become irritable. It can lead to fatigue, even problems concentrating, because the brain is so focused on threats, it doesn't have the bandwidth, so to speak, to focus on other things. And this becomes a vicious cycle where anxiety deprives us of sleep, and then the sleep deprivation makes the anxiety more active. You can see how it starts to spiral. Now, for many people, medications can be helpful. I don't think medications need to be the first line of defense, but SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, can help with depression. And SNRIs, in other words, selective noradrenaline serotonin reuptake inhibitors, that's a mouthful, can help with anxiety. Both of these are involved in creating more of those brain chemicals, those neurotransmitters, to be available so that our brains can moderate our emotional well-being. Some of the medications that are often prescribed for anxiety can actually start to become problematic, especially medications like benzodiazepine, like Valium, Xanax, and Klonopin. They can be really helpful in calming a person's situational anxiety and really can help people have a much better quality of life. And those medications are also highly addictive. And once you've become addicted to a benzodiazepine, the titration off of it and detox from it can actually be a really, really difficult and very long process. Now, when we look at the long-term effects of anxiety, as I've said before, states can become traits. States of anxiety, if it's not managed, can actually turn into traits of anxiety. That's what we think of as anxiety disorders. And it starts to change the way that we think and process information. It increases the brain's already existing negativity bias. In other words, when something bad happens, our brains stick to it like Velcro, as opposed to when something good happens, our brains are a lot more like a non-stick surface. It leads to this hypervigilance and hyperactivity in the fear centers, and then we start to misread cues as threats. It increases our rumination, so we get kind of stuck in our head thinking all kinds of negative thoughts, which then increases our anxiety. And long-term anxiety can actually cause long-lasting changes in the form and the function of the brain. The frontal cortex starts to shrink, and it lessens our ability to make sense of emotion and direct our responses. The hippocampus starts to actually favor threat-related memories, so our memories all become more saturated with fear and anxiety. And you can see, how so many people, struggle with anxiety disorders and even panic disorders. Now, when it comes to treatment, there absolutely is help. I've mentioned how medications can help some people, but also cognitive behavioral therapy can help people understand the nature of their own thoughts, and learning some very basic conscious breathing patterns, breathing techniques can help reduce a lot of the anxiety. Once your physical anxiety is reduced, then you can use CBT to correct some of your negativistic thinking. Things like progressive muscle relaxation can be helpful, and taking care of yourself, self-care. There's a connection between the thoughts and the physical sensations, and you have to kind of tease those out. There absolutely is help for people struggling with anxiety. I hope this has been helpful, And if so, I encourage you to like and subscribe and sign up for notifications so we can let you know when there's more material coming out. Until the next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other. Bye-bye.